Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 13th, 2023, and it's the final board meeting of fiscal year 23. Let's start the meeting with a roll call, please.
Clemens.
Here.
Here. Pantera. Here. Pisaneski.
Here.
Lenny.
Here.
All board members present.
Thank you. And I think we have some introductions.
Yes, for our trustees and particularly for our new trustees. Last month I did a large staff introductions. I'm going to do another large staff introductions today because we've been able to bring in some of the people you'll see all your terms of service. So new to you, Sarah Kelly Chase. If you could wave to people. Sarah is our head of public services. So all the services that we provide throughout all of our locations. Kate Radford is our, she is the youth services and home-based services supervisor. So you hear from her later. Michaela Britson is a youth services librarian, and I had a chance to watch her yesterday at the toddler story time, and it was amazing. That is a group with a lot of energy. If you get a chance, I cannot recommend this enough, but you do need to make sure you're ready to clap, sing, swim, and sometimes sit quietly if you're short. Huda Sheltree is the Hillcrest branch manager. We've also got Jen Villalobos, who is our branch manager for Hollister. And rounding up the branch managers here today is Joni Hansen, who is at Mountain Crossing. So last month you had an opportunity to meet Renee Erickson, who is at Home Music. So now you really had a chance to meet all of the branch managers. And you'll get to obviously get to hear them present, but we're really excited they got a chance to meet.
Thank you. In addition to being a regular meeting today, which will follow normal agenda at the beginning, it's also an annual meeting where we will set a meeting schedule for fiscal year 2024 and elect officers for fiscal year 2024 and consider the bylaws, whether or not any changes needed going forward. There are no communications that I'm aware of today. Is that correct? So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I assume everyone has had a chance to review them and I'd like to get a motion on minutes from someone who wants to then report.
I will move to approve minutes of the August 16th, 2023 regular meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Didn't quite hear you, Ron, but I think you said aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Motion carried. The consent agenda encompassed bills and payroll and financial reports. And as a reminder to everybody, each week, one trustee is in charge of reviewing the expenses and asking for clarification if there's any questions about an expense. And at some point, when satisfied, signing off on the expenses so that bills can be paid. This month was a little unusual. We had Rebecca and Nikki and me all signing under different circumstances, but we got through it all. And I think unless anyone disagrees, the consent agenda looks pretty straightforward. And we can proceed with a motion to approve unless anyone has a concern.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda for today's meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Got a unanimous vote on that as well, so motion is carried. Now we move into the report section. And the first report is from Jill Johnson, Friends of the Boise Public Library President.
Good morning. We have a really fun week this week. We have our annual or our monthly board meeting tomorrow, where I am thrilled that Jessica forwarded to us 4 scholarship applications for library staff to pursue higher education. As always, they are super inspiring. Reading those essays is probably the highlight of my board service with the Friends of the Library. So we're super excited to consider those next week or tomorrow. I don't know where I am in time. Also tomorrow is our book sale at Hillcrest. Huda, I'm surprised that you ran away and left us to tromp around in your space and hopefully not break too many things, moving all of our stuff in. We're excited to try something new by doing it in a new location. And the logistics this time are significant, as everyone can imagine. It involves a moving truck and several other things, but we're excited to try this experiment and see how it will work out in a new location. And tomorrow is a members only day, but as in previous years, library staff is welcome to shop on members only day without being a member. All they need to do is present their library ID card and we will let them shop with everyone else. So we hope to see lots of folks there.
Any questions for Jill? All right, thank you for the update, Jill. The next report is from Brian Manship, the chair of the Boise Public Library Foundation. Welcome, Brian.
Good morning, and thank you. It's good to be here. Not a whole lot to report, except I do want to just let everyone know that this is the month that we've been kind of waiting for and gearing up for with the Boise Comic Arts Festival. The foundation is the sponsor for the program, and so we're excited to be a part of that, in keeping with the mission of the foundation, which is to raise funds to support programs of the library, and also to educate on the enduring value of the library. The directors of the foundation will be on site at the Boise Comic Arts Festival in the zoo, and we'll be selling T-shirts, we'll be selling posters, but perhaps even more importantly, having those good conversations with people about what the foundation is and what the funds are raised for and how they can be involved in that. So we're excited to have many of our directors involved in that on Saturday at the zoo, and to have those opportunities. We'll be cutting the check for sponsorship this week, I believe. So that's coming up, and that will be funded very soon. Aside from that, that's what we are working on. I announced last month that we have 2 new directors on our board that I am happy to say we've been able to onboard and get acclimated somewhat, and so we're excited to have them on there. They're going to be real viable part of our foundation, so we're excited about that. And that's all I really have for today.
Any questions for Brian? All right, Brian, thank you for your report.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The next report is from Library Director Jessica Dorr.
Thank you. I just have a couple things I want to share, some reminders, and then I had a question that Brian asked me to speak to with you. First, in front of you, you see the final version of our 2022 annual report to the community. Nikki, thank you for your close proofread. We also have some of the materials that we have available with our strategic plan. So you see some of the things that are actually now in our locations, the bookmark. If you want to take home a poster, we can get you a poster as well. We've got stickers. So we're very excited about being able to share that with the community. Rebecca and Ron, we will put these in the mail for you so that you can enjoy them as well. And then also we have a reminder of BCAF. So you see a little one of our flyers for the Boise Comic Arts Festival. We are thrilled to announce for the first year that we have a wait list now for the Librarians and Educators Day. So only in our second year, we filled out all those spots early in September. So really excited about the interest that we received from the community on that. And then looking forward to seeing all of you, if possible, either at the zoo on Saturday or at any of the programs and sessions on Sunday. Then the other thing I wanted to remind you of is Carrie Davis sent an email to you, sent the invitation for the board and commission training that the city will provide. We really want to encourage you, if you have an opportunity to take that training, get a chance to meet more of a fabulous legal team, but some of the other people that serve across the city as well. And then the question that Brian asked me to speak to was related to the director report and the information that we provided to you about the water damage that we had when the combination of the youth services roof being replaced and a very strong rainstorm. One of the things that is the purview of the board is to make sure that the library has adequate insurance for all the facilities and the materials in it, and that is, the city is self-insured. So actually last December, and I can send out the link to this meeting to our new trustees, we had a member of the risk and safety team come and talk about how the city insures the library and how it makes sure it has the right asset list. In this particular case, because that was related to the construction, the insurance is being covered by the vendor. They have been wonderful to work with on this. So we have, Kathy and her team, was able to look at, okay, what were the books that were damaged? What were the materials that were damaged? What was the estimated cost of those? So that's all being handled. We did put it in the packet because we do anticipate at some point there may be a check that will need to be processed. And so we'll be bringing back an interim budget change request to you to approve for those funds. But this is not something that is at that level of self-insured. It was a minor water damage and it's being so background for our new trustees and assurance for all trustees that that is. And with that, if there are any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a quick comment. This is Jimmy Halliburton, Boise City Council President and Library Liaison for folks that are online. I just want to say good job on the annual report. As someone in the nonprofit sector, I'm a sucker for a good annual report. I also know how much work goes into it. And it was really cool to see the quotes from the branch managers, see some of those high level statistics. I couldn't believe how many people are going to Cole Music Library. Those high numbers are really impressive. But just good job, everybody who contributed. I'm sure you worked with CP, but I know that there was a lot of work in it that went involved. It's a really great document. It's kind of one of those things that gets to live on forever. You can go back and look at it. So it's always worth investing in, and you all did a good job.
Thank you. That's good to hear because our first meeting for next year's is in October.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an update on the fiscal year 23 summer learning program. And for that, we have Kate Bradford, Youth Services and Home-Based Services Supervisor, and Michaela Britson, Youth Services Librarian. Welcome and thank you for being here.
I'll get started. I'm Michaela Britson, and I'm here to talk about the ESSER Summer Strategies Grant funded by the Idaho Commission for Libraries. And just to remind everyone and new board members, this is a grant we received in the amount of $30,000. And the grant period ran from last October through August of this year. The main objective of the grant is to improve access to summer learning opportunities for those students whose learning was interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. When I presented for you in May, I talked about what our staff had done since October with the grant and our plans to partner with Boise City Parks and Rec Play Camps, International Rescue Committee, and Boise Community Schools. Today, I will talk about Boise's need for the work that we did, our goals, and some of the positive outcomes that came out of it. And then Kate will speak about the community partnerships that we developed and strengthened also. Reports from the U.S. Department of Education indicated that the pandemic had a negative impact on the academic growth of students, particularly those in vulnerable groups. Boise is a designated resettlement city for refugees, and the Boise School District has identified 37 languages spoken by students and their caregivers. 29% of families in Boise are identified as housing stressed, meaning 30% of their income goes to housing costs. In addition, the cost of living nationally has increased since August of 21. Transportation in Boise is also a barrier to access for those experiencing housing and economic stress. So with these needs in mind, and working within the goals of the grant, we identified 3 primary objectives: to increase access to summer learning opportunities, especially youth from underserved racial and ethnic groups and children from low-income families; provide regular and consistent outreach to bring our summer reading program out to youth, and access to materials, books, and prizes. And this was to build on the outreach that the summer reading did a great job of beginning last year. And develop and strengthen relationships with community partners. We accomplished these goals, we feel like. We hired 2 staff, 2 interns, which I talked a little bit about in our last meeting. And they were 2 university students, one attending in Boise, one in Oregon during the school year. They represented the library at outreach events this summer, designed curriculum for the programs, and helped build outreach kits. Having these interns provided consistent staff at these events, which we are not always able to do with our regular staff, just depending on the schedule in the buildings. And I think this allowed children to develop a relationship with them each week. And I think it was beneficial for both the students and the interns. And the interns also came away with a very positive experience, as they both are exploring careers in libraries and education. Also, I just want to mention at a recent meeting, staff from ICFL encouraged those applying for this second round of the grant to consider hiring staff with those funds. So it's something that's definitely encouraged. Specifically, we were able to bring summer learning programs to children at several parks where free lunches were served, refugee students at transitional housing with the IRC at a hotel in town, and to summer school students at a Title I school in Boise. Some examples of the programs we did included story times, STEAM activities like Marble Run and Infinity Tiles, and literacy activities that focused on social and emotional needs and communication. Most of the students participating did not have transportation to their local libraries, so this was their only interaction with the library and some of the programs that we offer. We also gave out a lot of books this summer. In this photo, you'll see Haley, one of our interns, with a group of kids choosing their new books. We filled them in wagons and they got to go through and choose and read them as they did. With the grant funds, we were able to purchase high quality, high interest titles that encouraged print motivation. And we were able to select books that were more specific to the population that we were serving. To better reach English language learners, we had the summer reading program instructions translated into Arabic, French, Swahili, and Spanish. We also created outreach kits for all of the branches that included wagons and basic supplies, materials, and even a library flag with the word welcome on it in many languages. It's beautiful. And lastly, since April, other staff members and I were able to attend monthly conversations about equity in our summer programs. And these monthly conversations gave us resources, a really fabulous workbook, and then also a national community that we are able to connect with as we work towards providing equity in all of our library programming going forward.
So I'm going to dig in. My name's Kate Radford. I'm the information and youth services and home-based services supervisor, relatively new. I've memorized it, now it's wrong. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about our partnerships and what they look like and what we're hoping to see going forward. So Boise City Parks and Rec play camps give us a great opportunity to work with one of our other city departments to cross-promote resources to the unique user groups that we each serve. Additionally, we're hoping to see this grow where we can iterate and standardize group reading activity offerings with the leads at those locations to help us better be able to provide those kind of packaged offerings to other groups, which helps us increase capacity for expanding some reading access without a huge investment of staff time. One of the other partnerships, as Michaela mentioned, was with the International Rescue Committee, and Huda Shaltri, Michaela, and our intern Haley were directly responsible for maintaining regular communication with that group and making this just an incredible partnership throughout the summer. Hillcrest actually started doing regular programs with them today. They'll be going monthly, and I expect we'll continue to see those opportunities with the group grow throughout the coming years. Refugees were a big group that we worked with this summer. They kind of showed up in all of the different spaces that we were doing outreach, and looking at the ways that there's a crossover and opportunities to work with the different groups is something that we learned a lot of through this grant and will continue to see going forward. And then one of our other partnerships that was really strong was the Boise Community Schools. And this relationship was built on the work that Renee Addington did during the strategic planning outreach process to help establish that relationship. And so she was able to make that introduction, and it has resulted in an invitation for the library to share library materials at an outreach event for new educators at the Boise School District this year, which was excellent. It also has resulted in us beginning a relationship with some of the Boise School District administration to help understand how the summer schools work and where we can best implement those services and collaborate and work together. We're hoping to see this partnership improve our ability to reach underserved students through targeted outreach going forward. One of the other things that I wanted to note, the Idaho Commission for Libraries, Michaela talked a lot about our goals for the program, and the Idaho Commission for Libraries kind of called out two broader goals: strengthening the role of libraries as community organizations and community connectors, which I think these partnerships really helped us do. And then also building the institutional capacity for staff. And again, I think those partnerships are helping us do that, as well as Michaela mentioned, that equity piece is something that we saw echo through the strategic planning process. We're hearing about it from community members. It's showing up in the school district. So I think we'll see that play out both with outreach opportunities, our summer reading program going forward, and these continued partnerships. We would love to answer any questions you might have.
I noticed participation was up this summer versus last summer. Summer reading program. Can you give us a little bit of clarity on that? Why you think that was?
That's a great question. We have several theories circulating. I think the one I've heard the most is likely that this was the first full school year where there weren't huge pandemic impacts felt. And so and we saw this with outreach, all of the groups that had done programs over the summer all launched back into them this year. So we saw an increase in schools and organizations and partners coming into the library and doing their own programs. And so everything had just kind of continued to ramp back up from previous pandemic slowdowns.
Any other questions?
This is Ron.
Go ahead,
Can
Ron.
you hear me all right?
Yes.
When the funding, this is obviously, limited in time funding. How do you anticipate keeping the program going in future years?
Absolutely.
Once the funding ends? It sounds like a really terrific program, and, really excited about all the work you've been doing with it.
That's a great question. And I think our hope is to use the learning opportunities we have with this to continue to capitalize on those partnerships. Now that we've built those partnerships, I think it's going to give us avenues into expanded partnerships, and it'll be easier to keep them going, as well as looking at those ways to sort of package summer reading and learning opportunities in ways that are targeted specifically for both our mission and values and kind of what we're hoping to accomplish with the strategic plan, as well as finding partners who are able to take that and implement those pieces with their staff. So we're looking at a bunch of different options, but I sort of see this folding in with our summer reading team and the outreach groups this year, and then sort of that continued partnership work.
Nikki, I believe you had a comment.
I just had a comment that I think this is so impressive and so well done. And sort of like you just said, I can really see how the strategic planning piece fits into what you've done here with the partnerships and increasing the impact. So really, I just had a great job. I think it's really impressive and well done. And I saw summer reading things everywhere all summer, like at all the branches, at all different places. And I think that was probably also why there was more participation. So I think it's a great program. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? I think we're done, right? Thank you. All right, now we have some guests on the agenda. A group known to me, I don't know if it's formal name, as Citizens for a Library in West Boise, representing 850 roughly petitioners, are on the agenda and to give us an update. And speaking on their behalf, advocating, are Mark Salisbury and Jennifer Gravel. Welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Slides going.
Yeah, I guess
difficulties right now, so. Get my controls back.
Are you trying to?
Their presentation.
Share screen.
There
You got it. All right.
Yeah, I don't have it.
Hang on one
I don't have
second.
the
Yeah.
screen.
You don't have it on screen yet. While Carrie's working on this, I'll just use this one. I think Ryan has a really good question about how do we sustain particularly the outreach and that piece that we're really looking at potentially to how would we add with ongoing funding, not one-time grant funding, is that intern piece. The learning we're Kate and the team are doing a really good job of embedding that and the efficiencies that we get into creating some of the modules that are really clear. So the fact that we were able to do so much outreach because we had funding for interns is the piece that we're really most focused on. How could we get additional funding for that? Because I went to some of the programs in the park with the interns. I went to some of the schools with the interns, and just having that flexibility really did allow us to have a longer term relationship. So that's when I think about the sustainability of that, Ron, and I'm really glad you asked that question. That's the piece that we really need to focus on, is how do we have some of that flexibility. There's other parts of the city that do have more of that sort of tent model, because Parks and Rec is a great example of where you have a big summer reading push tying it. So we're really excited about the strategy. So we're definitely going to focus on that. And then lastly, your point about how clearly it ties to what we heard in the strategic plan. Community wants us to lead in the education space, wants us to lead in making sure that students are ready to read, that they have great summer enrichment programs, and that we are more effective in internship. So again, thank you for pointing that out, Nikki, because we really do see tied to exactly what we heard from the community in that program as it was developed and as
Are we ready to go?
No, unfortunately, it's not showing online. We can see it in the room.
you can see it in the room, but not online.
Yeah, we're looking at the previous slide deck. So we have to
Yeah.
stop sharing the other.
I'm trying to get controls back. Even how to get controls back for that, but I hid them. And now I'm not finding them as an option.
Carrie, would there be a way to like link the PowerPoint in the comments so people could separately follow along?
All right, let
That's
me
not-
stop that. Okay, try it again.
Thank you.
Oh, we just.
Apologies.
There we go.
All right, I'm gonna hide those again. You might have to save us again.
And then switch on to full screen. There you go. And you guys are good.
We can see it now.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, first off, we'd like to express how grateful we are to be here. We know this is not the usual business of the library board. We represent a grassroots effort that, as you mentioned, is called Citizens for a Library in West Boise. My name is Mark Salisbury, and with me is Jennifer Gravel. I'd like to talk about why I'm here today, some data I've collected, the petition we started. Jennifer will conclude with ideas and action, and why we believe this has urgency. My wife Amanda and I have 5 children, ages 3 to 12, several who are avid readers. We know many other families that feel the same. I met Lucy Willits after she was elected to represent District 1 and showed her what library access looks like in Boise. Lucy immediately recognized the disparity that we have on the west side of the city and encouraged myself and others to be vocal about this in city meetings. We've also been working with the Centennial Neighborhood Association, and they've recognized this as a priority. Early this year, I decided to do some research. How could we look at Boise library coverage in an unbiased way? Is this an issue that other Boiseans believe is worth addressing? I also looked at library coverage and budgets in comparable cities, but our time is short today. To answer the first question, how to look at library coverage in an unbiased way, I put together one map showing distance from the closest library and combined this with 2020 census data. We believe that multiplying population by distance is a good measure of the need for closer library services. I selected 2 miles as a reasonable service distance. If you're within 2 miles of a library, you're covered. This is a reasonable distance to bike, but perhaps a little far to walk. There are 5 areas of Boise that are more than 2 miles from a library. The first is Highlands. I estimate there are 2,000 people in this area who live more than 2 miles from a library. The estimate is obtained by multiplying average population density by populated area. Distance is the total miles citizens would need to travel to reach their closest library, calculated by adding the population of each band times the distance of that band. Next is East End. Roughly 700, 800 citizens. Then Columbia Village, roughly 2,200 people. Boise Airport is a big area, but small populated area here, 900 people roughly. And then we get to West Boise, and we are close to 30,000 citizens in this area. And this is only looking at residents of Boise. This is not looking at Eagle and Meridian residents. This slide shows the population at each distance. Note that the distance everywhere are a little bit underreported because it's underreported because this is as the crow flies and we're not crows. But they're skewed equally. This is a visual representation, a chart showing the same information. I believe this data shows the need of different areas of Boise in an unbiased fashion. And I'd be happy to show anyone how I pulled these numbers together from the census website to double check my figures. I believe if you had another area of Boise with a similar disparity, they would also be here today to talk to. Next question, is this an issue that Boiseans believe is worth addressing? To help answer this, we started a petition. In May, we started taking this door to door. We shared this directly online with friends. I created citizensforalibrary.org to allow people to sign our petition online. We focused our efforts on talking to neighbors in West Boise, but people who live in other parts of Boise value libraries and support making equitable access. They have been happy to sign this petition as well. And the remainder of the time will turn to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thanks. The Boise Public Library's mission is to provide access and opportunity to everyone by connecting people to ideas, information, and community. You've heard the facts from Mark regarding the lack of public library access in West Boise, and now we're asking you to act. We understand that you've hired an outside consulting firm to help you with your long-range planning goals, but we're calling on you to consider acting before the report is completed. And some of the ideas we'd like to share would be to consider leasing current vacant office or retail space for a library, working with West Ada School District to convert underutilized school space for a temporary library, working with the Garden City Library, the Ada Community Library, or the Meridian Library District to bring one of their library buses to the West Boise area. Consider locations like McDevitt Park or another property for a permanent library. We feel urgency because especially with the new planning and zoning
Modern zoning code.
Yes, the modern zoning code. We understand that land will be used for infill, and so we feel urgency for that. I'm a lifelong library patron. And I am an advocate, especially for school libraries in Idaho. I've spearheaded space and collection updates at both McMillan and Lowell Scott Middle School, where my children attended school. I wish I had time today to tell you the impact on quality the lack of funding for decades has had on school library collections. It's really a disservice to our children and the families of our community. For 18 years prior to COVID shutdown, I was the Scholastic Book Fair representative in Southern Idaho, and I've spent thousands of hours in schools, in school libraries, and attending book fairs, talking about books and literacy with families. I've walked fairs and book talk titles that superintendents, principals, and families wanted me to pull from their fair because, well, not just for their children, but for all children, because they didn't like the book. Sometimes it was only the cover. I was asked to pull things like Captain Underpants, Harry Potter, Ginny B. Jones, any graphic novel, because it's not a real book. I was asked to pull any book with a scary cover, all books with commercial affiliations, and any books about events in history, including 9/11. The list goes on, and it's frightening. Now the environment in school libraries is only more hostile. Especially now, our community needs you. We need access to books. We need access to the technology you offer, the programming you offer. We need programs and access for the youngest readers through the oldest readers in West Boise. We need a library staffed with professionals who embrace research-based facts that diverse books are important to validate and affirm individuals, as well as to support curiosity and build empathy. I want to thank you for your time and ask that you consider some of our ideas. We're here to work with you, and we welcome any partnership. Thank you. We'd love it if you have questions about the report we put together, the petition, the research.
Let me just start by saying thank you for your interest. We're happy to have you here. It's always a pleasure to hear from citizens who use the library and are interested in seeing it grow. That's what we're all here for. I think through your efforts, you've reinvigorated a discussion about equitable access to libraries in Boise. It's been a long-standing discussion. It's not new, but truly reinvigorated. We're happy for that. You also, at the July budget hearing, provided some support for the library's request for budget for fiscal year 2024, which we can always use. It never hurts to have more people cheering for you. So we thank you for that. And I think I can speak for everyone in this room associated with the library. The validation that comes from hearing from people who want more of the services that we provide and think they're useful to their families and their community makes all of us feel better about doing what we're doing. So thank you. We just finished, and you know this because you had some sort of peripheral participation, setting the budget for fiscal year 2024. So when you talk about next year's budget, you're talking about fiscal year 2025. That doesn't mean there aren't ways to try and lobby for more money in fiscal year 2024, but it's a lot more difficult to accomplish this. You provided some useful ideas here, which we'll discuss and figure out what we can reasonably make some progress on. So that's all I wanted to offer right up front. I'm interested in anybody else who has comments or questions they'd like to make.
I feel like I'm always one talking. I wondered, one, I really, really appreciate it, and all of the information and data you've provided, I think is so helpful and will help us inform what we can do and why. My question is more for Jessica and your staff. I don't have a good understanding with all these ideas, what the real impact is and how feasible they are kind of operationally and financially. Is that something we could maybe, like, for example, I can understand how we might be able to lease a facility in West Boise, but I don't have a good understanding of like how long it would take and how expensive it would be to get the staffing and the collections and those. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Or similar with the idea of a bus type location. Sounds great. I just don't have enough of kind of what the impact would be and how we could do it, how quickly and how much. We definitely, I'm sure, can include all of this with our consultant and our report. I just don't have a good understanding of what's feasible between now and then. So I wonder if that's something
No,
we
thank you
could
for
look
the
at.
question, and I think that is the piece that we are working towards, and this is the process that we're following, and we hear the sense of urgency and we hear the frustration that this hasn't happened faster. The process that we're going through really was that deliberative. We need to have the updated strategic plan in place that heard from the community. One of our 12 key findings in that was about facilities and wanting to have safe, welcoming, well-staffed, well-resourced facilities in close proximity to where people live. We heard that. That was, very clear because it was such a high, key finding. Finding number 9. Not going to quiz anybody on it, but we know it really well here. Then that led directly to having one of our key initiative areas that does include, having that. We have a create library spaces that are accessible and welcoming to all. Success means Boise benefits from equitable access to comfortable, safe, and sustainable libraries in convenient locations. That led directly to the FY24 request for facilities planning. So we are on the right trajectory for that. And quite frankly, it's very important for us. We've had these discussions as a board. There's the capital. How would we fund some of these costs for the actual facility? But also, to your point, we absolutely need to understand what are the ongoing costs for maintenance and operations, the staffing, the computers, the books, the programming. And so that long-term facility plan really is designed to look across the city to factor in our growth. And I think we're in a really good spot. When I started and looked back at the last time the library had done a facilities plan was the year 2000, and that was a 20-year plan. And it, at the time, Boise Public Library consisted of this location and a 3,000 square foot location at the Boise Town Square Mall. So with that 20-year plan in 2000, that is how we created, the case and, the forecasting for budget, both at the Capitol, but also in that M&O to then create those 4 branches. And so I really do believe that this next step will absolutely look across the system. Where do we need to grow? Where's the city growing? And where do we have places where we haven't been able to put in a location that we don't have that access? So I wish I could go faster, but I need to make sure that we've got really strong alignment, which I believe we do between board, library leadership, and city council and the mayor. And that's when, being part of that July 11th meeting, that workshop, it was wonderful to have so many people talking about libraries and why they're important. Particularly, as you mentioned, coming out of some of the earlier discussions that year, where libraries did not did not have the same, we want more library feeling. So I think we're in a really good spot. We heard very clearly from council that expectation of continued community engagement, the same level, if not more, that we did with the strategic plan. They absolutely expect, as you do, to have a comprehensive plan and, really that equity lens. Like, how are we making sure that we're looking at equity in terms of physical distance, but also, I think, as we heard in our earlier discussion, who has language barriers, who has literacy barriers to access. So I'm really excited about the work we're going to do going forward. And I think we're just in a great spot. And we've heard very loudly from the community how much they value Boise Public Library and how much they want to make sure the library has the resources to equitably serve.
I just want to jump in briefly and offer a personal statement. Apologies for not being with you in person today. I'm a resident of West Boise. I live in the gap that you showed on your map there. I count Cole and Eustick Library as my home library, which my family and I use very frequently. And so I am well aware of what the challenges are in the area of West Boise that we live in. And if you speak to the fellow board members, it's something that I bring up in discussion in terms of how can we collaborate with the West Ada School District in addition to the Boise School District, and how are we doing outreach for some of the summer programs. So I just want to reflect that there is a bit of a personal commitment on my end as well for thinking through, while we take the time to secure what the fiscal and the strategic opportunities and possibilities are for us to bring a facility to the West Boise location, I definitely have my eye toward and am thinking toward, with the rest of the library board members, what does it mean to increase our outreach and our services that currently exist in those areas, and how can we be doing that in a better way? And always open to that feedback and response from the community as well. But I definitely hear you and understand what it means, and am continuing to look from my position at how can we continue to better promote the services that we do have and bring some of those opportunities into our Western region as well.
Thank you. That's fantastic.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I've got a question. I'll echo everybody else's thanks, for the work that's done here. We've had an opportunity to talk a little bit about this. The other valuable part that I think you all have engaged in is that outreach to community members and some conversations, that maybe haven't existed in other spots, which I think will be another important part, this facilities plan moving forward. But I'm curious, like, in that conversation with folks, I know that you've got one bullet point up here that talks about involving the foundation. Have you heard from other people during these conversations about funding mechanisms that they thought that they would be supportive of to help move things forward faster?
Well, I don't know, I was gonna say, most people didn't raise that as a concern, so spoke with them. There were some people that said, well, how's this funded? I think that's a legitimate question anytime you're spending public money, right? It's how do you fund it? We're already paying the taxes that we owe for the system, so we want to see that shared more equally. I think something else that came up in the city council meeting was the projected cost of a new library was put at between $20 and $100 million. And I looked up after the meeting what the bound cost of the library cost to build. It really wasn't close to that. It was 8.7 million with $1 million from the foundation. I don't know how much costs have gone up, but I have a hard time imagining we've gone up that much. Something that we think should be looked into.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it should be looked into. You might be surprised how much it's gone up. I think one of the things, I'll speak on behalf of the council. I think one of the things that we're struggling right now with council is we have a lot of projects that we've approved and funded or that are in the works, and they're not complete because we don't have enough funding because of those escalating costs across the board. Part of that, like, honestly, has to do with property tax relief that we've offered to our citizens post-COVID. We haven't taken a full 3% year after year. And by not doing that, we have offered relief, but we also have had to, and look at our different projects. So when we're talking about 2024 in the budget, if we're talking about actually putting more funds towards something, it either means pulling funds away from something else, or it means that somehow there's additional funds coming onto the table. And I think that for your group, you're sort of in a unique opportunity to be exploring some of those conversations. An example would be, we've had our Warm Springs golf course. It's needed a new clubhouse for probably, 15 years or so. And it wasn't necessarily in the plans to get done in the next 5 years. And all of a sudden the donor comes out of nowhere, and offers $7 million to the table to help get it done. And a project that goes, from not being able to get done to being able to get done, can change pretty quickly. And I know that those $5 million donors, tell you from the nonprofit sector, they're not everywhere. But through outreach, through conversations, you do begin to find that community support. And then I think you do begin to get a pulse on folks as far as their property tax dollars on what they would be willing to spend, and if there is interest. And I think that that's another valuable part for you all to go forward as you continue to come back, both to this group and to council, is getting a general appetite of, are there other funding mechanisms out there? What appetite do people have? If there's projects that are being done in the community parks, because there are some new parks that are going into West Boise and some sections of pathways that are there, like, are there things that you'd rather take funds away from to have funds go towards? And I think that that's sort of the challenge, is that if you were looking at 2024, we really are talking about, unless other funds come to the table, what are we pulling away from funds from to go to something else? And that's always a challenging conversation to have. Because I think that, as you continue to do this outreach, that would be something that would be helpful, to, get a pulse on how people are thinking and feeling, going forward. Because I do think that with our long range plan that we're doing here, we'll be able to factor some of that stuff in. But for change to happen faster than that, it takes some work to make that.
That's the $64,000 question. Where's the money?
Yeah, so I think your idea though, to connect with the foundation and just begin that conversation there, look for grants, talk to donors, potential donors, businesses, etc. That's excellent, and I appreciate that. Those are great next steps we can take.
And one other thought, just to remind everyone, the room is filled with sympathetic ears. That's heard anything you've heard, but do remember that the last effort we made to have expansion of the library system was a significant failure. And one of the reasons we're being so careful and deliberate in following a process, getting professional consultants in to help us walk through and build a proposal that should result in the best solution with the highest probability of success, is because of that past failure. And it's something that we have in mind all the time. When we get up to the plate this time, we want to hit. And so just keep that in mind as we go forward.
Thank you. We feel that the numbers and the interests speak for themselves, and I hope you did hear that today. So hopefully that gives you encouragement that from our part of the world of Boise, there's a lot of support. So thank you.
When we started this, I don't think we were really aware of the plan to make a plan. But I think the timing is working out well. I think these things are happening together at the right time.
Okay, well, thank you again
Thank
for
you.
your attendance and participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to shift into the annual meeting portion of our agenda. And the first item is a selection of meeting dates for fiscal year 2024. I think our package included a proposal for those dates, and it follows our normal cadence of the second Wednesday of every month. And I hope you had a chance to review
It's on page 12.
that. I did notice one thing. It looks like it only goes through August. And at least the meeting invitation, the Zoom meeting invitation, looked like it only went through August. Pardon?
That'll be updated.
Okay, all right, great. Does anyone have any issues and concerns or concerns at this point regarding the meeting agenda that's been proposed? Meeting schedule that's been proposed? All right, is there a motion in favor of the meeting agenda, meeting schedule?
I'll move to.
I move the adoption of the meeting.
Okay, and Nikki, will you second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's 5. That's unanimous. Motion carried. The next topic is the election of officers for fiscal year 2024. There are 2 officers, president and vice president. I'd like to take a moment to describe my experience as president, and then perhaps Rebecca could offer a few comments about her experience as vice president. My first year as a board member, I spent 4 or 5 solid days preparing for each month's board meeting. I hadn't been on board before, I hadn't been involved with the library so closely. There were a lot of things to understand. I was constantly looking up acronyms and documents, contracts on the internet, doing homework just so I could catch up and not slow everybody down. So my first year, and it took going through a full year to really understand what the whole process was and how it all fit together. Second year, just a normal preparation kind of went down to 2 or 3 days. And I think that's where I am hopefully going forward. But I think the presidential duties roughly double that time budget. Somewhere between 4 to 6 days a month, working on things in support of the meetings or in support of the library agenda. Aside from participating in programs and activities in the library, there's a lot of working with donors, calling them up, saying thank you for donations, working with the city on looking, evaluating, and responding to proposed legislation in the state. I remember, and I felt for Mark just a few minutes ago here, trying to squeeze your comments down into 2 minutes in front of one of the state legislative groups. I remember writing my first opinion I wanted to offer, and it came out like 6 minutes, and then I spent 24 hours trying to shave it down to less than 2 minutes. So it's a lot of time that goes into doing preparation, and you have to expect as president that your preparation time goes up. And I think that's the best estimate I can give you, and should keep it in mind as we're going through the discussion. Rebecca, do you have anything to offer about vice presidential duties?
I would just say be prepared to step in for the president in doing the preparation and leading the meetings as that happens, and also being available just for backup for other things. I also participated in the legislative component this year, although I would offer that I would personally do that no matter what my role was with the board, just because that's a big part of why I serve with the Boise Public Library, is to be able to advocate on the behalf of those board members. But I think just that ability to be prepared and have that good working knowledge of what's going on. Although I would also offer that I think I accepted the vice president nomination on my 2nd or 3rd meeting. So I didn't even have the full year that Brian talked about. So I've been learning while on my feet. And I think that that's definitely doable with that commitment and desire to be able to serve the library in that way.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is have just an open discussion about candidates for the role, and see if we can agree on someone and nominate it with a motion and a second, and then vote on each of the offices. I'd like to start the discussion by saying, asking Nikki if you have interest in the president's job. You are the longest serving board member who has not previously served as president. And I'd just like to find out if you have interest.
I would be willing to do that if that's the will of the group.
Okay. Are there any other candidates that either would like to speak for themselves or someone would like to propose them as potential candidates for the role? Does that mean there are none, or people are too bashful at this point? Big room full of lots of people.
I guess I would just offer that I would be willing to serve again in another leadership level position. I've been pretty dedicated and involved with the library this last year. I spend a lot of time showing up and participating, in particular for staff. That's a deep area of enjoyment and commitment for me personally. So whatever that looks like for the board, I would just offer that willingness to continue to serve in a leadership capacity for the library.
Any other comments or questions or proposals? Is there a motion to nominate Nikki for the role of president for fiscal year 2024?
So
I'd like
moved.
to go ahead and make a motion. And Ron, are you willing to second the motion?
I am.
Okay. All in favor of Nikki Trammell Pantera serving as president of the Board of Trustees for fiscal year 2024, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
motion carried.
Congratulations.
I'd like to start the discussion on the vice president role by saying that I think Rebecca has already mentioned, she stood up at a moment where there was not a lot of other interest in the role, similar to how I got this one. And I thought she had a lot of activity, more than expected. I had travel and illnesses and a few things that required Rebecca to step up. She not only was interested, but very effective in speaking before the legislature. So I'd like to propose we consider Rebecca again for the role of vice president. Any comments about that as a proposal? Okay, I'd like to move that we approve Rebecca as vice president for fiscal year 2024. Is it? All right, we have a second. All in favor of Rebecca Lemon serving in fiscal year 2024 as vice president of the Board of Trustees, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. We've accomplished our goal there, and we can move on to the next topic, which is a review or amend or appeal or adopt bylaws for fiscal year 2024 and beyond. And a bit of an introduction here. I found during my first year when I was reading all the onboarding material, by the way, I'd like to point out that Ron and Reshma have been through onboarding in the last month and got a big binder, big thick binder, which I spent about a week reading after I got the binder. I don't know what you guys did or not. Maybe you haven't gotten to it. Maybe you dug into it. But one of the things in that binder is the bylaws, and I hope you have a chance to review them. But I found that somewhat confusing when I looked at the bylaws and then looked at the state library laws and then looked at the city library laws. They were all sort of different. There were similarities, but there were a lot of differences. And I felt it was a little confusing to have the bylaws, which I considered our most immediate governance tool, have differences in certain areas. So my first action as president was to propose that we look at revising the bylaws, and a number of things happened along the way that resulted in delays, and not the least of which was potential legislation that could have changed the nature of the work of the board, particularly relevant to books in the library and access to books in the library. We never got around to reviewing, making a specific proposal on bylaws in fiscal year 2023. And we still do not have one now. What we do have in the packet is a couple of pages that resulted from some of my early work and some comments that I got from Ed Jewell as he reviewed my early work. And I tried to summarize those to say, here's why I think we ought to update the bylaws. If we decide to do that, we'd have to form a subcommittee of a couple people who would go off and come back with a proposal at some future date. And they would have to give the board 2 weeks' notice prior to a meeting to review proposed changes to the bylaws so it could be voted on in the meeting. That is one path forward today. Another path forward is we say, this is not that big a deal. And we're served okay by the bylaws as they are now. Let's just move forward with the bylaws as they exist and no action is necessary. So that's what the topic on the agenda is before us today. Again, I've kind of expressed my opinion. I think some changes are in order, but I've even moderated somewhat over the course of the last year. They're not as much of a priority as I once thought they were. That doesn't mean I don't think it's a good idea to go ahead and update them, but I'll leave it at that. Comments, please.
Brian, I think first I apologize because I know you sent these to me to redline and I have not gotten any changes. So I think what my suggestion would be, if everybody open to anything, is we go ahead and sort of everybody this month take the time to collect our suggestions and send them. I don't know if Ed, you want to collect them and redline it, or I can, and then send it to you. I mean, I'd like to review it at least, and make sure we're not doing anything we should. I do agree generally. I don't think any of them are showstopper or causing problems, but since you've done the work, I think it makes sense to go ahead and clean them up. And then maybe we can review the red line at the next board meeting and potentially approve that, or would we have to review the red line at the next board meeting and then wait for 2 weeks?
So it just has to be, the proposed amendments have to be distributed to the board at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting.
Oh, okay.
In which you're going to vote on adopting the revised bylaws. And so one way you could bring the proposals to the next meeting, I'll talk about it. And then this meeting after that would be an action item, vote on.
Yeah, I just want to at least give everybody a chance to actually review the changes more. I know they were in the board packet, but I didn't have time to really digest them and see if I had more changes.
And for clarity, these aren't even really proposed changes. They're inconsistencies that I've noted, things that Ed suggested, you ought to clarify this if you're going to make a change. And it's a list of those things.
Yeah.
It would require someone to produce a revised bylaws for consideration.
So I don't know. Does that sound like a reasonable path forward for others to go ahead and make a proposed amendment to look at that next time?
So are you saying you'd like in the
So between,
October meeting, you'd want Board of Trustee members to come in prepared for a discussion that would lead to a red line version? Put that in the November packet. Vote on it. Like, we're just trying to line it up
yeah,
with the cadence.
what I'm suggesting is we would have a red line prepared for October meeting.
For the October.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think the changes are so substantial that it would take a lot of time. And then I think if everybody agrees with them on the October meeting, as long as we add it to everybody 2 weeks before, we could take action at that.
I think what we'd like to do, just because it'd be easier for us to keep with the cadence, to not try to do a mid-month packet publishing, is actually to ask you if we could publish it the month prior. And then, so we would publish a red line version in your packet.
Right.
In 1 month, and then the next month have it as an action item to vote on. It would just be easier for us in terms of documentation and the process. So that would be our one request.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, well, I know the person who's in charge of the process going forward, and I'm happy with that too. Okay, so I think that's it for that agenda item. We've got a rough plan defined for moving forward, and Nikki's responsible for that. And the next item on the agenda is the selection of a trustee to review the payment vouchers for the month of September. And that's Nikki. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
All right. And the next item on the agenda is the next meeting date, since we just voted on the meeting calendar for next year. And the first meeting is exactly as was proposed in that calendar, October 11th, Wednesday. I assume that this is just a reminder that no one's concerned about October 11th as the next meeting date.
I do need to let you all know that I won't be able to attend that meeting as I will be returning from a trip to Hawaii with my family. So I will miss just this one.
All right. You can always dial in from Hawaii with Zoom.
I mean,
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will move to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you very much for your participation.